I'm Eric Wolf, and my experience in business peer groups has changed my life, especially my membership in Vistage, one of the world's largest CEO advisory groups. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Vistage speaker on the power of marketing. This podcast is dedicated to the people who make those experiences possible, the peer group chairs. Every episode, I interview a Vistage chair who has dedicated their time to helping entrepreneurs like me succeed. My guest today is Kirsten Yurich. Kirsten comes to us from Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is in fact the same place that the candy comes from, correct?
Absolutely. Smells like chocolate today.
And it smells so. So does that come up like on your weather app when you check when you get out of bed in the morning and you
That'd be
say,
great.
"What's the weather like today?" Does it say chocolatey?
Yeah, and it says like, are we roasting peanuts today or almonds today? Yeah, no, it
That's
doesn't. But that would be
okay.
great. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
because
yeah.
you get like the allergen alerts and you get
hmm
the
hmm
smoke alerts and I don't know, maybe chocolate's the same thing.
We should tell them about that because that would be pretty clever.
Very cool. So so tell me, so Vistage Chair,
Mhm.
CE Group, correct?
Yep, an AL and EL.
And so what led you to, and I've got your whole history here and we're going to talk about it.
Sorry about that.
But oh no, that's fantastic. What made you want to become a Vistage chair? And by the way, in the material you sent me, you also disclaimed that your group was the best.
Of course.
So so we're going to talk about that too.
Sure.
But
Sure. Sure.
what led you to become a Vistage chair? What made you decide that that's what you wanted to do with your career?
I really didn't. I
You were
decide to
drafted?
do it. Yeah, I was
Was it
drafted. I was drafted.
was there like a trap like the stick in the box
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I lost a contest. No, um, I'd been coached by the best practice chair in the area here. I'd been to groups, so I knew what Vistage was, what it meant, what it felt like to walk into the room and sit at the table. And so I knew, full well what the impact Vistage has. And I had had a change in my career and I retired as a CEO and it was COVID times and was home with my four kids. And this best practice chair called me and said, "Had you thought about being a chair?" Because he knows, I'm very much into
right.
leadership development, had been a leader quite some time. And, I answered him honestly. I said, absolutely. I think it's an amazing give back to the community and an awesome opportunity, but maybe in about 5 years or so when I feel ready to do that. And he said, "How about now?"
No time like
And
the present.
yeah, and I just really didn't have a good answer. So yeah, so sort of drafted.
What was it a situation where they sort of had a group for you or
No, 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 no. I went
oh
straight into academy.
they actually lassoed you in to go now and build your own group.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I didn't know any better. So that was probably my fault. I probably could have asked for more things. No, no, I went straight. A couple months later, then I went into academy and did all the things, and I think you're better for it. And then grew my group the latter half of 21. And we're 3 years in now. It's
That's
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah.
What specifically, and I know that it's a thing that you say, but specifically, what makes you look at your group and say, man, this really is the best group. This is where I belong.
Well, we are a heart and head group. So it is a group that will, on any given day, walk in and we'll talk about uh, things that are very personal or things that are business oriented. And I think that's one of the very special ingredients that Vistage has, but it's not in any or not in all groups. I
Right.
think there's some groups that are very, up here, and then there's groups that, go the whole way.
As I mentioned, there's like a really cool variety of stuff in your history that I feel like we should talk about a little bit. But the first thing that I just absolutely cannot pass without asking about is you are a board certified behavior analyst.
hmm
When did you become a board certified behavior analyst?
2003.
And so this has been kind of a thread that's run through a big chunk of your career.
Yeah.
How what was the path that you were on that made you decide to do that? And then from there, how has it helped you since? And I imagine that it actually plays quite nicely with being a Vistage chair.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thread throughout everything, as you say. My first career was as a clinician. So I really started actually in serious mental illness. I started as work with the chronically mentally ill, uh, not quite state hospital and committed, but just the step down out of that.
Gotcha.
And very challenging work. And I was in grad school at the time, and I switched at that point in time from sort of generic psychology over to behavior analysis, which is a more natural science based and a little more laser focused area of psychology. And at the time was becoming much more prevalent and popular for individuals with disabilities, specifically autism. And that's where I sort of got captured over to a startup at that time. And I went in on the ground floor. And 18 years later, I retired as the CEO of that organization.
Oh,
And so that's
wow.
really where my career as a clinician and then as a leader really took off.
That's
Yeah.
that is a much more vertical journey than I think I would have anticipated having, but that's really, really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it was beautiful and a lot of learning along the way, a lot of layers, a lot of leadership lessons learned as you're flying the plane, as
Right,
it were, for
as it
sure.
were.
Yeah, yeah.
How does your experience and knowledge of the human psyche translate to being a Vistage chair and working with your members?
Yeah, it's perfect and it's well, it it helps me see patterns and helps me see what they're seeing. And then, I differentiate between coaching and mentoring and I can with having the two types of groups, I can walk both of those lines. And so in
Right.
the CE group, it's a little more, it's mentoring, and in AL and EL, it's more coaching, right? It's a little bit more of an expert model and you're imparting and you're setting goals and things like that. With a behavior analysis background and, an understanding in the learning science and measurement and human performance and those kinds of things, you see patterns and you see them repeated over and over and over again. And basically, behavior analysis is we know why people do the things that they do, right? And so that knowledge is super helpful in a system and in an organization. And as leaders are, as they often do, complaining about things that are happening in their organization,
Right.
I can kind of be listening for those patterns and those understandings that I have, and then just on the CE side, be gently asking some guiding questions that lead them to a different perspective or a different level of understanding or a different way of thinking about things or, a different way of trying something where they can then discover for themselves what they need to know.
That's really cool, and it's a unique perspective. So
Hmm.
I think that's a really neat thing about you.
Yeah, thanks. It's
What
fun.
was what about taking that turn from being a CEO and then suddenly being in a position where you're working with CEOs and they're and they're looking up to you as a Vista chair obviously is a peer, but it's more than a peer. It's
Hmm.
it's somebody who you really really value as an executive. So how did that shift happen for you, and what did that feel like?
Yeah, I would say it's always evolving. I have pretty high standards on myself, and that uh, comes out every once in a while when I'm not holding up my end of the bargain in my own view, right? And so one of the lessons that I've learned is that they've taught me, honestly, is that I don't have to be perfect to be useful for them. And that is really a gift that they've given me, even though I'm the one that's, trying really hard and hustling to give them gifts throughout this journey. But they've in turn given that to
But
me
that's a
too.
really lovely sentiment, and
Yeah.
and the and yes, you are the person who is sort of in charge of delivering the value, but that's really nice. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I that shift was important because when I put it on myself, anytime one person tries to carry everything, it's really going to be a failure. But if I look at it as creating the space where we're all going to pour into it,
Right.
then everything we need is there, right? And they've got the opportunity to pour into that space.
What's something that you learned being a Vistage chair that you hadn't known either about yourself or the way that business works, or what's something
Mhm.
that you specifically, one way that you've grown from the experience of being a Vistage chair?
I would say that similar to what I just shared is that the leader does best when they don't have all the answers. For many,
Right.
many years, I led, from a place, and I do this in my speaking, like I led from a place of expertise.
Hmm.
And until I made that shift of leading to a place of curiosity, which is what I think we need to do as chairs, and then as a mentor, I'm doing that a lot with my members, is your expertise is what got you to where you are. But if that's where you stand when you're thinking and acting and listening to the people around you,
Right.
you're probably appearing closed off and fixed, right? Versus if we can stand in a place of curiosity with our teams around us, you don't have to, even though you might know the answer in the back of your head, you're just waiting for people to get there. I get that, right?
Right.
Having that patience to allow those people around you to get to that answer, or the humility that maybe they'll get to an answer that you didn't think of, and that answer is okay too. That's been, I think, a really valuable lesson that we continue to learn over and over and over again.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
There's a whole dimension of what you do beyond being a Vistage chair that you just alluded to. You do speaking, you do workshops, you do professional development.
Mhm.
Tell me about that part of your work.
Well, get a lot of value in going deep and really unpacking concepts and getting people to a level of understanding and delivering experiences for groups of people. And sharing is one way to do that. It's not the only way.
Right.
And so I do it through a variety of ways. I do my own workshops. I also work with Brent Robertson, who's a speaker in Vistage and has a company called Be Generative. I deliver that work as well. So we have leadership experiences through there. I also do a podcast where uh, it's a local podcast and it's just about literally having local leaders talk about their experiences and that learning because I believe that we lead in community with others, which is why I do the Vistage work, right? It's the community piece that is so powerful. And we can, run into somebody on the soccer field, the sidelines, while your kids are
Right.
playing, and their story is amazing and you can learn from that. And so the podcast is just about elevating that influence. And so those are some of the things that it's just these little vehicles that continue to deliver that impact and fill my bucket along the way. It's just different ways of doing the same thing.
That's amazing. What do you find when you're working with and being somebody who's coaching, mentoring, working with current and future leaders in a lot of different capacities? What do you think is, what do you see as the most important qualities that folks should really be working on in themselves right now versus
Yeah.
versus say, back when you started your career,
Hmm.
and I think that people were sort of put in different buckets, and what maybe our generation looked at and said, this is what work looks like and this is what leadership looks like. I think that the evolution looks different. What do
Yeah,
you think?
absolutely. Well, I grew up as a leader, uh, you know, as a working leader, right? I didn't have an education in leadership. And so it was about having the answers, doing the work, putting in the hours, those kinds of things. And I think it's much different now. You have leaders of leaders in companies, and that human element is much more important now. Well, I don't know that it wasn't important then, but it wasn't as valued then as it is now. And with the evolution and implementation and introduction of AI, which is going to take a lot of some of the work or accentuate a lot of the work, what's left is our human connection, right? And so those pieces, if you are a leader that excels at the human connection piece, you will outperform someone who is just technically accurate or technically capable. And so I think those human elements, so your basic, curiosity, your humility, your vulnerability, even your accountability. So the ability to say these are the things that I am accountable for, and that's my impact on others, how I show up as a leader. I often say, and I got it from somewhere, is that the leaders create the weather, right? So when you show up, you are making the weather inside your organization. And are you bringing rainbows and sunshine, or are you bringing storm clouds, right? When you walk in the door every day, that's up to you. And the leader that doesn't see that is not an accountable leader.
Absolutely. That's
Mhm.
a really great way of saying that. What do you think is the biggest value that folks get from that peer group experience like Vistage that maybe they didn't expect coming in? What's the thing that if nobody tells you that you have to be a Vistage member in order to
Mm.
realize? Oh my God, did I stump you?
No, no, I'm trying to like put it into words. I know I paused too long, right? You're gonna have to edit that out. Uh, because I've heard a variety of things like, oh, this is what I got, this is what I love. But there's those folks that come in thinking they're gonna get one thing and they get another thing. And then they realize that other thing is what they really needed but never knew. And
Right,
so it's awareness and it's perspective, but they don't come in for that. They come in for, oh, I want opinions and I want guidance and I want to not make mistakes and I want to be with companies that are bigger. So they have a lot of operational expectations.
right.
I don't think they understand the personal impact that being part of a core group who has your back and, is half the time hugging you and half the time kicking you in the ass.
I think that's a really good description, and I think that a lot of us going in probably don't realize exactly how much of what's holding us back and holding the business back is actually in there. And how much of them,
Yeah,
how many of those problems are looking at you in the mirror every morning?
right, right. No one's willing to tell you that. And those people brave enough to walk into that room are going to be the companies that grow.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, Kirsten, if folks want to get in touch with you, if they have questions about Vistage or
Mhm.
questions about perhaps how to join the greatest Vistage group in history in
Right.
a place where
In
the
Chocolate
weather is
Town.
chocolate,
Yeah, that's right.
how should folks get in touch with you? What's the best way?
My website is kirstenyurich.com. Pretty easy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank
joining me, Kirsten.
you.
This was
This
a
was
real
fun.
pleasure.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Chairwaves. You can subscribe to our feed using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your platform of choice. You can also visit chairwaves.com for more information. Chairwaves is hosted and produced by me, Eric Wolf, and to connect with me, you can visit my website at ewolf.live. That's EWOLF.live. And a disclaimer, while I love Vistage and CEO peer groups, this podcast is not owned by or affiliated with Vistage or any other peer organization. Thanks for listening.